Part one, we covered spiritual bypassing, and we talked about narcissism, holier than thou. I spoke a little bit about toxic spiritual communities, cult-like behavior, harming. I did not go so much into examples of guru misconduct, but I posted on my Instagram story, right, and Facebook story about this particular Indian guru who, I mean, he was being accused of sexual misconduct and misconduct on several levels. So he fled from India. And then what happened was he formed his own country, which is quite interesting. And they decided to become they signed this treaty with New York, and they wanted to be like a sister country kind of treaty. And then New York City realized that they were scammed. And so this is funny, right? And so the whole treaty was, obviously null and void. But you see, when people don't do their research or develop critical thinking, this happens, right? Even in non-spiritual communities, in non-spiritual environments, this can happen. And people can be so naive, and it is a funny story. All right, and how an entire city, can be scammed into signing a treaty. So the moral of the story, obviously, is that we all need to be very, very discerning, spiritual or not, right? And all the more so, in our day-to-day, what we read in the news, what kind of things we're consuming. All of these requires us to be very discerning. I think for a long time, for decades or maybe centuries, humanity has been so naive, and that's why we are so easy to be scammed and so easy to fall into groupthink, right? I spoke a little bit about groupthink in the last live stream. And the reason why people fall into the trappings of groupthink so easily is firstly the avoidance of shadow work. Secondly, is a disconnection from reality and not questioning, right? And as I've said also, that it is so important for us to question. We must question. We must not be afraid to question. Right, it is our ability to question that makes us different from other sentient beings, that makes us different from other living things, on this planet. And the fact that we are born, right, we're built with an ability to think, to have critical thinking skills, is what makes us different. Unfortunately, we're not using it, okay? We're not using it in the way that we should be using. We're not using it in a way that's going to be beneficial for us. We're not using it in a way that is going to, assist us, okay? So today, I want to talk about, I want to expand on the points, right? On the dangers of spiritual communities and groupthink, including cults and toxic guru-student relationships. And you may be experiencing this in your own group dynamics, whether it is a mini spiritual group that you have formed, or it could be in a church environment, or in a wider scope of a religion, okay? So one of the key things to watch out for, which is the easiest to spot, is when there is exclusivity, where your group or your religion tells you that you are an exclusive group, and you reinforce a mentality of us and them, right? This us and them is separative consciousness, and it's extremely popular, not random, extremely, what is that word I'm looking for? Anyway, it exists in most religions, most mainstream religions, and even in spiritual communities, new age spiritual communities, where there is an us and them mentality. And this is the separative consciousness, right? I find it really, really interesting that while they are preaching oneness consciousness, that we are all children of God, children of whatever you want to call it, children of the universe, we're brothers and sisters, the undertones of an us and them mentality, it's so strong in churches, in temples, in the us and them, which goes against everything that the religion is trying to cultivate or teach. It goes against the cornerstone of the religion, even when there is an us and them mentality. But the tendency is there, the us and them mentality gives it is a red flag. For me, it is a red flag. This red flag only shows us the potential for it turning extremely toxic and becoming, it's an early signs of a cult. Let's put it that way. So if you belong to a church or a religion and there is an us and them, I'd like you to be aware that there is a potential that the organization that you're in has the fringe flavor of a cult. And what can you, as part of the congregation, do about it? Because the only way that you can cultivate oneness consciousness is for you to bring this up in your community so that you are, you're proactive, right, in doing this, that rather than shutting the outside world, rather than saying that, or having a sense of superiority, like us, we are better off than them, right? Now, this not only happens in religion or spiritual communities, right? I mean, even between countries, even between races, this is that us and them kind of mentality. It's so deeply ingrained within human consciousness. It's so deeply ingrained within, even embedded within our DNA. It's almost like we can't help it but have this. And this is why critical thinking is so important, right? If we can allow ourselves to move out of that mode of operation, right? Instead of going to the us and them, we ask questions. And instead of judging people outside of your community or marginalizing people outside your community, thinking that they know less or they are less refined or they are less spiritual, they are less evolved, if we drop that and see that whatever we are doing, right? Let's say in your religion or in your spiritual group, you are doing something for humanity, know that you must be inclusive, right? And if the leaders are not inclusive, I would challenge you to question, take the scriptures to them and question, is this what we are practicing? There is nothing wrong in questioning your leaders. Your leaders need to be questioned. That's how you keep them on their toes. That's how you keep them, you are doing them a favor, because then you are helping them not to fall from grace. You have to question. But of course, questioning doesn't mean that you do it rudely. You can question them in a very polite way, and you can question them in the name of better understanding, in the name of personal development, right? And so just watch for this. It is extremely rampant, very, very rampant in most organizations, spiritual, religious organizations. And it's so very toxic when this happens. Okay, because it creates division, it creates intolerance, and then it becomes a closed-minded approach to spiritual growth. Spirituality is expansive. Expand, right? You're there to expand your mind, you're there to expand your horizon, expand your consciousness. And if the community is closed-minded and has this us and them mentality, then how are you going to expand your consciousness? How are you going to grow? How are you going to develop your consciousness if it is closed-minded? All right. I mean, this is logic, right? I mean, just use logical thinking and think, yeah, that makes so much sense. If it is a closed-minded or closed community, the us and them mentality can then start to breed a lot of resentment, a lot of judgment for the outside. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, the other thing also to watch out for in your spiritual communities, whether it is your again, mainstream religion or spiritual groups or new age groups, is emotional and psychological manipulation. Right, so manipulative tactics would include love bombing or gaslighting. There are two extremes. What is love bombing? Love bombing is everybody will say things like, you don't really know them in the community, but then they go like hugging you, kissing you. Oh, I love you so much, my sister, blah, 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 blah. Right, I love you so much, my brother, you do no wrong, you are a perfect child of God, you are innocent, I love you, I love you. That's love bombing. If anyone does that to me, they don't know me, and they are doing it in the name of their religion, in the name of spirituality, I will pin a red flag to that. All right. Because we're human beings living in this world, and we have our spiritual essence within us. And if you love bomb someone, I would question, where is that coming from? What is that agenda? What is that shadow energy that drives the love bombing? But if you know each other for a while, you have been in the community, you have gotten to know each other. It's like any other love relationship, right? You don't love bomb someone at the beginning of, the relationship. You don't really know the person, and you don't start telling them that you love them, that you just every day just bombard them with love. You don't do that, right? And if you do, it's a red flag in relationships, right? Now, then there's the other end of the spectrum where you gaslight. You gaslight your community's experience. You gaslight your brothers and sisters' experience. You gaslight, if you are the leader or the leader of your community, gaslights your experience and puts themselves in a position like they are more superior than you, and that your experience is not valid. These are tactics that are being used, right, to cultivate toxicity and to manipulate you, to make you stay small and to dumb you down. Because when you are easily emotionally manipulated, you become very dependent on the community, and you are easily controlled. And it's very difficult for you to leave the community. And what's more, it makes it very, very challenging for you to question the community's practices. Now, if you challenge your community's practices and you are being clamped down and you are being, all kinds of things, gaslighted and so on and so forth, it's a red flag. The leaders who are being questioned must be willing to be answerable, to be accountable. So when you question and they give you space to air your grievances or have answers, right? If you are questioning and you want some answers, and they give you that space to explain, to teach you, to empower you, to help you to expand, then that's a good community to be in, because a healthy community does not mind being questioned. A healthy community is not going to be so hyper defensive that they will shut you down without even listening to you. If your leaders are hyper defensive, it's a red flag. Okay, so just really keep that in mind. Okay, so when you are exposed, right, to these emotional and psychological manipulation for long periods of time, you no longer know what is right or wrong. And even when you're being manipulated and abused, you don't even know. And that's the danger. And then you're not able to get out of it. Okay, and this is very dark, right? The manipulation of people. Now, the thing is, most people who are manipulated don't know that they are being manipulated. That is the thing. Until one day where they feel like they are, let me check, something just went off. Okay. Until they feel like something is off, they're no longer, you can see it in their eyes, right? They're no longer the vibrant self. They're no longer, there's something missing within them. It's like there's something slowly destroying them. On the other hand, you will have also people who become so hyper happy. They're like full of joy and, oh, I'm really happy. My environment makes me really happy. Okay, if they are on this end of the spectrum, it's also a red flag. When they are too happy, you know that there is some shadow energy agenda trying to hide something, trying to mask something. So there are always two ends of the spectrum. It's very extreme, right? And what we actually need is to strike that middle ground. There's always this two ends of extreme where people are so depressed, right? So controlled that they become zombified. They don't know what's right or wrong. They just follow instructions. This is one end. Then there's the other end where people are like, oh, the community, it's so good. It's so loving. I love it here, blah, 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 right? And they usually speak in these kind of high-pitched voices too. So two ends of the spectrum. And the thing is, these two groups, right, the extreme, they are unaware that they are being manipulated. So the people on this group, the depressive group, right, they have a problem. They go to their leaders and they need help. And the help given keeps them locked in that cycle, because then they're being gaslighted. They're being told that, because you are this, you're not good enough, you did this, you did that. So there's a lot of judgment. And so the person being judged will feel very trapped and feel like, okay, without this community, I cannot grow and I cannot get out of this vicious loop. And then people who are hyper happy and like, oh, my community, right? These people are then living in an illusion, and they are masking because of a fear of acknowledging to themselves that they have made the wrong decision. Okay. It's really dark, right? On the psychological side. Now, the other thing to watch out for when you're being, if you get a sense, right? You get the sense that, okay, maybe my community is manipulating me a little bit. One of the next things to check is, have you lost your personal identity? Okay, usually your personal identity is lost because in a group think, in an environment like this, in a spiritual community like this, you are not allowed, in inverted commas, right, to be different. The minute you're different, you are a troublemaker. You are labeled a troublemaker. And so your sense of who you are, yourself, is gone. And it's only being defined by your association with the group or the guru or the religion. So when you have a loss of disconnection from your personal identity, this can lead to a disconnection from your own values. And you're not able to even, you're not sure about who you are, you're not sure about your own personal desires anymore, because you're just leaning on the community to give you the answers. All right, so critical thinking skills are so, so important. Okay, so what are things that you can do to make sure that you do not fall into the trap of a dark guru, or the dark side or shadow side of your religion? You can continue to attend, right, the church or the temple or whatever you want to call it, and you do not have to be part of that dark agenda. Now, as I've said in the last live stream, most of the time, the leaders themselves don't know that they're operating from darkness due to their own psychological blindness. And this is the key thing. You don't know what you don't know. And because you don't know that you yourself, let's say you are a spiritual teacher or spiritual leader, and you don't know that you are operating with a dark agenda because your psychology is not clear, and you don't know that, and your limited psychology or your gray psychology is being passed on to your congregation, to your followers, to your students, to people who follow you, and all of that. And when that happens, this whole thinking, this whole mode of thinking is then being propagated, is then being spread. And it's not based on the values that were originally, espoused by the religion itself, or the origins of the teachings. It's just not pure anymore. Okay, so firstly, cultivate self-awareness. You have to engage in self-reflection and to always understand your own motivations, your own beliefs, and your own emotional patterns. If you don't understand yourself, how are you going to see the darkness outside of you? There is no way you can see that unless you have truly worked on yourself. And that's why, in this channel, right, I always talk about shadow work, consciousness work, and why it's so important to develop this within ourselves and to see how we are operating, right? If we are always looking outwards, then there is no way. It's almost like a distraction. You don't want to see what's going on inside you, and so you are, out there. Okay, you're looking outwards. Look inwards. When you look inwards, you can see there is a wealth of wisdom within you that enables you to see how you operate. And you're not perfect. None of us is perfect. And we sometimes, if we can catch our own dark agenda, our dark motivation, our maybe screwed up beliefs, and our chaotic emotional patterns, and we can see that and make the adjustments as required, then you can see it very clearly, how other people are operating. And then you can see it in church leaders or religious leaders or spiritual New Age leaders. You can see it so clearly, okay? Develop a deeper understanding of your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and ask yourself, how can I grow? Okay, besides my community, my religious or spiritual community supporting me in my personal growth and development, what else can I grow? How else can I grow that is outside this community, right? And know that it is okay. It is okay to go outside the circle and learn. Because there are a lot of things that you can learn that are not available within the circle, okay? And recognize also and address any tendencies that you may have towards spiritual bypassing. If you want to know more about what spiritual bypassing is, watch part 1. I'm just going to give you a summary now. Spiritual bypassing is when you are using a spiritual excuse or spiritual technique to replace the icky feelings or the pain that you're experiencing. So instead of sitting with the pain, you just pray over it and wish it to go away. You want it taken away from you. Or if you're in New Age, you use the violet flame. You want to violet flame them all away because you don't want to stay with that feeling. There is power in staying with that feeling. Okay, go watch my other videos on inner child. I have 2 inner child videos and 1 inner parenting where I teach you the techniques. So I'm not going to repeat them here. So go watch. Okay, look for them in this channel. Now, as I've said also in part 1, that it is perfectly okay to embrace skepticism. Nothing wrong, right? I mean, we don't want to be extreme skeptic where we don't believe anything and everything. we need that balance, right? We embrace something and we ask ourselves, okay, but let me question why is it like this? Be like a 2-year-old, be like the annoying 2-year-old who keeps asking why. We were trained at 2 for a reason, right? We at that age, right, 2, 3, 4, and maybe even beyond, we keep asking questions, why? There's a reason, right? Our brain is made that way, where we are curious. We want to know why. And somewhere along the line in our education or in our integration or mingling with society, we are this thing about asking why is taken away. We no longer want to do it because we're being judged, we're being laughed at, we're being dumbed down, we're being, all kinds of things, right? So we stop questioning. We have to keep questioning. We have to ask why. So maintain healthy skepticism and critical thinking mindset towards any spiritual teaching and practices, just like the one I'm teaching now. Question it, right? Question with healthy skepticism. Don't question just to criticize without an understanding. Okay, I want to motivate you to go further than just glossing over and criticizing without any validity. And this is the problem, right? Most of us, we question things with the intention behind it is to judge and to criticize without any real substance. And this is not why we're here, right? The whole goal of this particular live stream is to teach you to have healthy skepticism and to have critical thinking mindset, to question things in a healthy way. Research and from different perspectives. And we cannot just stick to one and think, okay, I'm locked into this perspective. This is the only right perspective. We need to be able to see all the other perspectives and go like, okay, all of these perspectives, they are valid. They may be in conflict with one another, but they are valid. And I'll take on board, all these different perspectives. And then I develop my own critical thinking abilities. And I see, okay, from this perspective, I take this and I release the rest because I don't resonate with this. And I take this perspective, I take the good stuff and I let go of what may be outdated or doesn't serve you, or maybe goes against your own personal morals or personal beliefs, right? Whatever it may be, it's perfectly okay, right? And one of the key things that people often say, people in spiritual movements often say is, we don't want to use logical reasoning for spiritual arena or for spiritual development. I would say logical reasoning is very, very valid. I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm also a psychic. I'm an intuitive coach. And I use a lot of logical reasoning as well. I feel that there must be a good balance, right? If we don't use logical reasoning, then we'll just be so naive and take everything that we perceive as spiritual as something good. But what if that spiritual thing is not a good spiritual thing, or not a good spirit for that matter? So logical reasoning is important. And it's so important to avoid blindly accepting information without discernment or independent investigation. We've seen this happening throughout the entire pandemic. I know pandemic is not spiritual per se, but there's cultish thinking, isn't it? The way everything, right, was being run worldwide has a cultish tinge, right? Where you're not allowed to think for yourself, you're not allowed to do your independent research, and if you do, you are deemed as being not cooperative, you're not thinking for the greater good, and that you are endangering other people, right? That's all cult thinking. Very dark. Okay, so I know I'm making this connection in a way, oh, you know what I'm saying, right? If you're watching this and if you still don't know what I'm talking about, please ask a question here, because I would really like to answer. All right, I'll answer it in a video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, okay, this lack of discernment with regards to pandemic, I want you to ask questions because I want you to have clarity. And it's important to have that clarity because we are entering very interesting times on the planet right now. Okay? Now, develop an ability to discern between genuine spiritual insights versus misleading or manipulative messages. This happens a lot, right? In mega churches, in mega temples, mega whatever, where there's a huge congregation of people. And how do you move people? They're extremely manipulative, how people are being moved. And the thing is, most people just lap it up. They just lap it up because, you know, it's a divine inspired message or God inspired message. But how do you know? How do you know? You don't know what you don't know. Okay? So listen to your own intuition and your own inner wisdom. Evaluate the resonance and authenticity of the spiritual teaching. So important. And one of the other things is to assess the credibility and integrity of your spiritual leaders. Before you trust them, you have to assess them. Okay? And if your spiritual leader minds you questioning or assessing their credibility, it's a red flag. If they take this personally, it's a red flag. There is nothing wrong. If you want to follow someone's teachings, there is nothing wrong in questioning. Like, oh, what is their background? Where do they come from? What do they do? You know, like, how do they, what is going on? You know, nothing wrong in asking. Or, I mean, you don't have to personally ask. You can just watch, right? From the things they say, from the things they do. Be very discerning. Don't go into this fandom, right? Being such a fan of your spiritual teacher that you're blind to all their faults. No one is perfect, okay? No one is perfect. Next thing, to avoid falling into the trappings of the dark side is to recognize that spiritual growth is an ongoing journey. And the truth is, no one, not a single person on this planet, I don't care who you are, whether you're calling yourself the head of a religion, a head of a temple, you're head of the whatever, right? Or you're some incarnation of whoever, I don't care. No one has all the answers. And that's the reality. If you claim to know all the answers, that's a red flag. No one has the answers. No one has all of the answers. Okay? Now, embrace a humble attitude that acknowledges the vastness of the spiritual realm and the limitations of personal knowledge. Right? Personal knowledge. We can only consume that much, right? How much can we consume? We can only consume that much. And if we think that we have all the answers in this vast spiritual realm, then obviously it's a red flag. Okay? Or you have a spiritual teacher saying that, it is a red flag. It's not possible. Okay? And of course, be open to learning from others. Now, there is also a need to balance the spiritual and the practical. I spoke a little bit about this in part 1, but I'd like to expand a little bit more. It's so important to integrate our spiritual practices and our spiritual insights into our daily lives and with our daily responsibilities. What keeps you humble? Ask yourself, what is it that you need to do at home that keeps you humble? So for me, will be cleaning up after my pets, picking poop for the dog, right? That's like, practical, humbling, down to earth. It really keeps you down to earth, right? Sometimes people think that, I've reached a certain stature. I don't do that. I don't pick up dog poop. I don't clean up after people. I don't wash dishes. I have helpers, or I have maids, I have servants to do all that for me, or my congregation does all these for me. It's a red flag. If you don't even know how to do simple tasks because you have elevated yourself to such an extent that you are no longer humble, then it is a problem. Because the cornerstone of all religions is humility and humbleness. And if you don't have that, question mark, question mark, question mark, right? Okay. So cultivate humility. Embrace, be open to learning from others, including those from a different spiritual path or different levels of experience. I've learned quite a lot from my non-spiritual friends. They may not necessarily have a religion that they follow, or they may not even have a religion, but they use the common sense and the simple human values to do the right thing. There is so much to learn from that. Because sometimes, and that in itself is spiritual, right? If you want to label it. But it's the no-name kind of spirituality, right? Where it's just human basic kindness. There's so much to learn from there. And kindness in many spiritual movements and religions is missing. In all of these big organizations, people have forgotten the simple thing about kindness. Completely forgotten what it's like to be kind. Okay, let me just do a quick check on. Okay. So the other thing, seek authentic teachers and communities. The communities must promote or prioritize at least ethical behavior, integrity, and transparency. If there is no transparency and if they act out of integrity, challenge the community, question them, okay? And most importantly, look for leaders who encourage personal growth, critical thinking skills, and independent exploration. If you have a leader or teacher who keeps you locked into their teachings only, and we say, okay, you can only study my stuff, You cannot go out there to study other people's stuff because that's going to contaminate you. If that's the word that they use, a red flag. I challenge you to raise that red flag. Okay? So much, right? So much going on in communities, spiritual communities, or in the name of spirituality, right? Manipulation comes in, control comes in. Okay. Now, I like to answer, there's so many questions here, and I feel that in answering the questions, we can get, I'll use it as a teaching moment, right, in asking these questions. I answered one in the last live stream, and if you're watching this and you're interested to know the answer to this, I would encourage you to watch part 1. So the question was, how can I recognize if I'm engaging in spiritual bypassing, and what steps can I take to address it? So I have answered this question. So to go look at part 1 for the answer, I think you will find that it may empower you. Okay. All right. Let me look at the list of questions I have. Okay. How can we protect ourselves from being influenced by groupthink within spiritual communities? The answer to this is what I just covered, which is independent thinking. Foster independent thinking by seeking diverse perspectives. I mean, with the internet now, it's easy to find answers, right? It's easy to research. And while you're doing that, by the way, do not just use Google. Use other search engines as well, because it helps you to have greater diversity. Because Google will only give you what the majority is searching for. Google is part of groupthink, by the way. So I hope you know where I'm going with this. So use other search engines, use other browsers. The other browser that I use when I do research, besides using Google or Chrome, I use Brave as well. Okay, it's important. You must have that diversity. So when you have that diverse perspective, then you can then evaluate the information, and then you can engage, in dialogues with people who are interested in the topic. For example, there is a particular topic in your community that maybe it's a hot topic at the moment and you want to discuss it. Have that diverse discussion, right? And if you have I think in some religious group, you have the cell groups. Assign assignments or give assignments to different people in the group and ask them to do research from different browsers and different search engines and come back, right? So when you do things collectively, then you go like, oh, okay, this browser gave me this information, that information, and then you look at everything and you have healthy discussions, and you encourage questioning, you encourage respectful dialogues, and then everybody gains from this. Okay, so you can use the same tactic or same technique for anything that may be outside of spirituality, even, right? From banking to food supply, to climate change, to all the hot topics, pandemic, right? Apply the same techniques. Everyone needs to cultivate discernment. Everyone needs to protect ourselves from groupthink, the power of groupthink, and walk on the spiritual path with your eyes truly wide open. If you can't see the dark agendas happening on the planetary level, you will not be able to see the dark agenda in the spiritual realm. Okay? Very important. So on my social media, I often post things that are not spiritual at all. There'll be things like the political agenda. There'll be things like farming, climate change, all of these things, the pandemic. I post all these things so that people have an idea of what's going on, and we need to move out of groupthink, question everything. Okay. Now, the other question, is it necessary to be part of a spiritual community to progress in the spiritual path? Not necessarily. You do not have to be part of a spiritual community to progress. However, it will help. It will help, because if you are not the thing is, not everyone has leadership abilities and capabilities, right? And if you do not have leadership skills, it's not it's not inbuilt in you, then you may find difficulty being independent. And if you have difficulty being independent, then it is better to be in a spiritual community. But it is not essential for individual growth, right? In the spiritual community, what you get is support, what you get is guidance. But your personal practice, your own self-study, you going around with different groups, engaging in dialogues can help tremendously. So you don't have to just belong to one spiritual community. You can belong to several spiritual communities. And that way you get a diverse perspective, right? And you're not sucked into groupthink from just one group. Okay. And that's, a healthier way to do it, I feel. Next question. How can one strike a balance between embracing spirituality and staying grounded in the practical realities of everyday life? I would say you practice mindfulness in your daily activities. So let's say you have to do the dishes, pick up dog poop, clean up after your cats. Do it with mindful gratitude that you get the opportunity to do this as service. And that way your spiritual values has come into practice in your daily activity. Obviously, there's just one example I've given, right? I mean, if you don't have a dog and a cat, you do it in other ways. I incorporate mindfulness also in the care of my parents, my very elderly parents. It can be very tiring, but at the same time, I see it as a mindful practice to be available. And the elderly, they sometimes can be lonely and they want people to listen. So I'm there just to listen. And my father always says this, let's not rush anywhere, because usually, today is Thursday. So usually Thursday, I take them out for lunch. And so sometimes, I'll show up at their place and my father would say, let's not rush anywhere. Let's just sit here and chit chat. That's what he likes to say. Let's sit here and chit chat for a while. But it's not really a chit chat. It's him talking and me listening. But I give him space. It's not that I'm fighting for airtime. I don't need that airtime. I know that he needs the airtime, so I give him that. Okay. So, and he may repeat the same stories over and over again. Because it just needs to come out, right? So I'll allow it. And I use that as part of my mindfulness practice, to be very mindful of my thoughts, my emotions, what I'm feeling as I'm listening. So you can incorporate mindful practices into daily activities. Practicing gratitude is important, and engage in self-reflection. And have a healthy relationship with the outer world, right? And be with people who are not spiritual as well, because they help to strike a balance for you. It helps you to stay grounded, stay connected, and that's vital. All right. So if we're only just engaging, with spiritual people, then we only have one type of thinking. We don't know what else is going on in the world, right? Just like when I was in a business network, I was with this business network for a good 10 years. And in this business network, we have a diverse number of traits, right? People coming from different businesses, right? They're all business owners running the businesses. There's a diversity. And what the diversity does is it gives us a better understanding of how things can be done from, let's say, a contractor's perspective. And we get a different perspective of how things can be done from a feng shui master's perspective, right? And when you get all of these different perspectives, it makes you fuller as a person. So same with life. When you are just engaged in just spiritual talk all the time and you don't get diversity, your worldview becomes really, really small. Your worldview is so narrow. You only know this topic, right? If I ask you to talk about spiritual things, that's everything you can talk about. Ask you anything outside of that scope, you know nothing. It doesn't make you a complete, well, I don't want to say a complete human. That doesn't sound right. It doesn't make you have a wide worldview where you understand and can see, because the wider your worldview, the greater your ability to open your heart and to have compassion and understanding towards someone else. So even people who are not on spiritual path, right? We can cultivate, we can adopt some of their perspective and thought, oh, that's an interesting perspective, all right? And how can I incorporate it? How do I then maybe incorporate some spiritual values into that and see how it works, right? So, striking that balance is so important, right? So we can find ways to apply spiritual insights to real world challenges. We definitely can. Okay. I think I have time for one more question, which I'm going to answer here. What are some red flags that indicate a guru-student relationship that may be unhealthy or abusive? Okay, throughout this entire live stream, I've given a lot of red flags, right? I've said, after I said a certain thing, I'll say that's a red flag. But here, I'm just going to maybe give you a summary or a conclusion. So signs may include excessive control and isolation from family or friends. Sometimes a community can tell you that because your family and friends are non-believers, you should not be spending so much time with them, or else you're going to be negatively influenced by them and you're going to be contaminated by them. Does this sound familiar? This is more common than people realize. That's a red flag. Why? If you truly believe in your spiritual path, you truly believe that the teachings in your spiritual path or your religious organization is so powerful, why do you fear losing people? Why do you fear that people are going to be contaminated? Why do you fear that people are going to leave you? Okay. The other thing is, if your religious organization or spiritual group demands, the key word here is demands financial contributions, that's a red flag. If you join a congregation and part of the criteria for joining the congregation is you must contribute a certain percentage of your salary and they use scriptures to back that up, that's a red flag. I know many churches do that. It's a red flag because it should be voluntary. It's not like a must. It's not like demand, okay? And if you feel manipulated in your spiritual organization or group and there are no boundaries, your boundaries are not respected, that is a red flag. And you feel something inside you, feel like something is off, right? I feel like something is completely off. Leave. and find and seek help, right? Seek help, get the support that you need, seek help, get yourself healed on the emotional and psychological level. It is so important to be able to do that for yourself. And when you do that, the thing is, once you leave the cult or the group, you can then see on hindsight, like, oh my God, you know, indeed, I have been manipulated. I have been, you know, all kinds of things. Okay. So I hope this live stream here it's very helpful and useful for you. I will continue to take questions. You can always send me questions that I, you know, maybe I have not covered here. And if you do have, you can either post them, you know, in a comment below. I'll probably be editing this, you know, live stream as well into different parts, shorter clips. I will also edit, because sometimes in the live stream, my voice and the video doesn't sync. When it doesn't sync properly, it's quite difficult to watch. So I usually repost it as a video. So watch out for it if you want to re-listen to it. Okay. So I wish you a fantastic month of June. Month of June is exciting. A lot of excitement for a lot of people, for a lot of astrological signs. There is so much of planetary movement, so much of interesting movement going on. So yeah, it's going to be really exciting. So I wish you well, and watch out for our next live stream. If you have suggestions on the kind of topics you want me to cover, I welcome your suggestions as well. And I will see you again very soon. Okay? Bye for now. God bless and namaste.